So hello everyone. My name is Graham Timmins. I'm the Postgraduate Director responsible for talk programs in the Graduate School, and it's my falls to me to say hello to you, to welcome you to this session, and not just to those of you who are in the room here now, but to those of you who will be listening to the recording online afterwards. This is the second day of the Postgraduate Research Festival, and I hope if you attended any of the sessions yesterday, you found those useful, and I hope you're also going to be attending more sessions today. This is part of the UOB Extra Festival, so please also have a look around and see what else is on offer over the course of the week. I hope you find all of these sessions helpful and useful. This session today launches the Summer Dissertation Support Programme, which the Graduate School and the Academic Skills Centre provide. There will be PGT Essential sessions throughout the summer, and we'll also be offering in-person Shut Up and Work sessions, which sound excellent. This support is all designed to help you, our students, to make the most of your studies and to achieve your potential whilst you are writing your dissertations this summer. So please have a look, and you can find more information on the Graduate School website and see what's on offer and see what could be of use to you. So let's get today's session started. We're fortunate to have 3 speakers from the Academic Skills Centre here talking, who will provide guidance about how to manage your research project over the summer and to hopefully assist you in making sure that it goes well and that you are as successful as you possibly can be. And our first speaker, the important thing I was almost forgetting is hopefully, if you have any questions, please ask them, and you can do this by visiting slido.com. And we can find the information here on the slide here. So if you can find your way to the slido.com website on your laptop or your phone, and the code is hashtag 3428503. And you can type in your questions there, and once we finish listening to the speakers today, we'll go into a Q&A session and we'll be reading out the top questions. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Zabig Gash. Zabig, please come up, and thank you very much for speaking today.
Okay, so beginning your research project, so how to go about starting it. Now, you're all postgraduate taught students, so presumably you've all had experience of being a student, of doing research, of finding information, and so on. So what I propose to do whenever I have any postgraduate taught students to teach on a course or a one-to-one, what I tend to do is present them with what I call a confidence checklist. So I've got a list of these things there, which you may well already be familiar with, you may already be confident with, but the thing to do is in the initial stages of your course is to make sure that you're confident in all of them as far as possible. So take your time and check on some of these things. So the first thing I suggest is going to your library services subject guides. We have subject guides for all the major subjects taught at the university. They're all laid out in a similar way. They introduce you to all the basic databases, websites, the basic tools that you need for that particular subject. And they have links, of course, to all our materials that help you with these things. And you can always book a one-to-one session with one of us through there as well. So that's the first thing. The other thing is we have 2 Canvas modules that we produce in library services, and what I would suggest you do is go to your Canvas page for your course either the Canvas page for your course or a Canvas hub that you may have for your subject, and see if there are those two modules present there. One is finding, using and evaluating information, which goes into all the databases and the tools for finding information. And there's another one called Good Academic Practice, and that is to do with referencing and citation and so on. So have a look in your Canvas module. If those two modules are not there, go and see your tutor about them and pester them to book one of these courses, because these are tailor-made for each particular course, each particular subject. So there should be those two for your whatever subject you're doing. The next thing I'll mention is Find It at BHAM, which is what we call our library catalogue. All the information materials and sources of information, the databases that we have, can all be found through that link. So go to Find It at BHAM and make sure you're familiar with what's there and how to navigate your way around it. The next thing after that is make sure you're confident with using the main databases for your particular subject. And I'll mention some more about those in a second. But most subjects will have at least one or two professional and academic databases devoted to their subject. And whatever subject you're doing, it's a good idea to become thoroughly familiar and expert with using them. And then referencing. Next one is referencing. First of all, make sure that you find out which referencing style your department expects you to use. Most departments use Harvard referencing style, but some do use others, and it's a good idea to make it clear in your mind which ones you're expected to use, and then again become as familiar with them as you can. Now we've got two resources available to you. One of them is a thing called Cite Them Right Online, which is a commercial database which provides guidance in all the main referencing styles, and all the ones that we use at this university are present on that database. And it's a good idea to select the style that you're using and make sure that you know how to reference, because it'll give you a whole range of options of different types of things you might want to cite, say books, journal articles, conference papers, videos, anything that you might want to cite. It'll give you examples of how to cite in text when you're doing your writing, and also how to cite the full reference in your bibliography at the end. So what you need to do is just see how they do the different examples and follow them exactly to the letter, doing all the capitalization, all the italics, all the punctuation exactly as they do in the examples. And very soon, if you do a few of those manually, after a while you become quite proficient. You'll know what to expect and how to do it. We also have a thing called EndNote Online, which is an online system which enables you to store references in different folders for different purposes. It can import references from bibliographic databases, and most importantly, it can work with Microsoft Word to put references in a range of different styles. But there's no substitute for knowing your style and being confident with it, because sometimes you need to know whether the imported references or the references that EndNote Online puts in for you are correct or not. Okay, and finally, knowing where to get further help. Our last slide will show you where to go for further help. So that's your confidence checklist. And what I'll do now is briefly go through what I think is a logical way of starting to find or starting to research any particular topic. This is the way I would do it anyway. Okay, first of all, you need to find some books to read around your topic, to make sure you know the background, you know where your research fits into the bigger picture and what the latest publications, the latest thinking is on your topic. So for that, the best thing to do is find some books to read about it. And if you go to Find It at BHAM, the only thing to remember is when you're looking for books is to change the little option in the drop-down menu from everything and change it to library catalogue, so that you won't be looking through absolutely everything we've got. It'll focus on the books, and you type in your keywords and it'll find the books for you. Stage 2, I would suggest, now a lot of students turn their noses up at the idea of using encyclopedias. Encyclopedias are still useful. In a lot of subjects that you'll be doing, there will be one or two very good electronic up-to-date encyclopedias online, but please don't despise printed encyclopedias. They're still useful, and the way to do that, if you want to find an encyclopedia or encyclopedic work, is just to type in the keyword for your subject and then just type in the word encyclopedia afterwards. So medicine encyclopedia, romantic history encyclopedia, anything like that with the word encyclopedia, and it'll go through all the books and just find the encyclopedic works. There are various other things you can use. Two very good things we've got are, one is called Sage Knowledge. Now that is a database. You may know the name Sage Publishers. They're an academic publisher, and they specialize in handbooks, encyclopedias, dictionaries, reference works of all kinds. And we've got a subscription to all their works of this nature. So in fact, Sage Knowledge can be used almost as an encyclopedia. Just type in any keywords for your subject and it'll find articles or chapters out of books which are at an introductory level and are encyclopedic in nature. And a good encyclopedia article will give you the history of the study of a topic. It'll give you all the contrasting or conflicting ideas about it and guide you to further reading about it. So those are the first two stages. I do mention Wikipedia as well. There's nothing wrong with using Wikipedia. You probably have all used it before. Most Wikipedia articles are very, very good, very respectable, and they usually give good bibliographies and links to further reading. Right, so those are your first two steps. Now the third step, this is the most important one because this is where you find all your research material for your research. And for this you need to use what we call a bibliographic database. Those are, again, commercial databases which index everything that is published in a particular subject as and when it's published, and it'll give you subject headings, abstracts of the article and so on, and details of where to find the articles. Now, here are a few I could suggest to you. I've put them in three categories because there are general databases like Web of Science and Scopus. Those are the two that we have subscriptions to, and they are both international massive databases. They cover all subjects, despite the name, not just sciences. It has social sciences and arts and all the rest of it. So those are the general ones. Down the bottom are the specialist ones. So as I was saying, most subjects have their own specialist database. So Medline is for anybody studying medicine, Compendex is for engineering, Westlaw for law, Anthropology Plus for anthropology, obviously. So there may well be one in your subject. So again, you need to become familiar with it. And in the middle, I've put a category of databases called the ProQuest databases. Now, not a lot of students, not a lot of lecturers seem to be aware of those, but they are a very good resource. They're very easy to use, as I'll show you in a second. We have about subscriptions to about 60 or more bibliographic databases in all subjects through our subscription to ProQuest. But what ProQuest do very kindly is they group them in broad subject headings. So we've got ProQuest Health and Medicine, ProQuest Social Sciences, ProQuest Business, and so on. So there will undoubtedly be one ProQuest cluster that is appropriate to your subject. So make sure you visit it and have a look, see how it works. And there's also Google Scholar. Again, you're probably familiar with Google Scholar. It's just like the ordinary Google, except that it only indexes registered academic and research websites. And it is very good in two particular areas. It finds what we call grey literature, that is to say, research and scientific literature that's not published through academic journals or through the academic pathway, but on open access institutional repositories. But you can be 99% sure that it's good quality material, good quality academic material, what you find on Google Scholar. So don't be afraid to use that. And that link up at the top is to effective search techniques. Now there's a special way of searching all these databases using keywords and what they call Boolean operators, specific ways of putting keywords together logically so that you find exactly what you're looking for. So if you want to brush up on how to use Boolean operators, go to our guide on effective search techniques. That's one of our library guides. Okay, and very briefly, this is just an example. If you haven't seen these ProQuest databases, this happens to be the ProQuest literature and language grouping. And I've done a brief search there. I was interested in the use of phonetics in language teaching. So I put in my keywords for the two aspects of it, for the two facets of my search. So phonetics and language teaching, I've put language teaching as a phrase, and as an alternative, I've put in TESOL, teaching English as a second language. You know, you can think of other alternative ways of putting a particular facet in. So I've put them in two different boxes, and then that finds something like 900 hits because it's a big topic. As you'll see, a lot of them will have the full text already in the database, so there's no problem finding the full text of whatever you find. But these databases also have very good, useful things on the left-hand side. For example, the date range for publication. So the earliest it's found here is 1894. So you might want to just limit it to the most recent articles. But a very useful one is the subject there. So if you get a lot of results like 900 as I have here, it's worth going into the subject link. And what that will do is that will produce a list of all the subject headings that are attached to all these articles that it's found, and there may be something in that list that I can focus on. So I've found two here that might be interested. Let's say I'm interested in teaching pronunciation, accurate pronunciation. So there's pronunciation instruction, 36 articles, and pronunciation accuracy. Those might be useful. You can pick out as many as you can, and then those will focus it in on your subject. So that's basically how a ProQuest database works, and it'll work similarly to all these other groupings, subject groupings in ProQuest. So do try that one out as well. And that's all I've got to say for the moment. And now we've got Stephen Griffin, my colleague, and he'll talk to you about thinking critically. Okay, thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I've been asked to come and just briefly talk about thinking critically, which is one of those essential skills. I like to think of it as an essential skill all throughout academia, certainly during a time when you're putting a dissertation together. The demonstration of your ability to think critically is absolutely crucial to getting quality research and for getting a good mark in your dissertation. In terms of definitions, we hear the word critical thinking mentioned a lot all throughout university. It's almost a buzzword, you know, think critically about this or be analytical about that. But essentially, all it means is the ability to think clearly and rationally about a range of different topics. And while you're doing that, you're going to be engaging in reflective and independent thinking. So it's the ability to think about things independently, critically, at a distance and objectively, that sort of thing. Some of the key components of good critical thinking: it's evidence-based reasoning. You're evaluating information based on the evidence that you see. You're not jumping to conclusions or making wild claims about your subject that can't be substantiated. And this is all done through the process of logical argumentation, synthesizing your own conclusions from the data that you generate or from the reading that you do, and also turning that on its head. It's analysing other people's arguments and other people's conclusions to evaluate them and see whether you agree with the statements that are being put forward in front of you. So it's a double-edged sword in a way, synthesis and analysis rolled into one. And all the way through that, you will of course be questioning and criticising any assumptions that you have yourself, any biases that you might have that creep into your work or your methodologies, and kind of keeping tabs on those and making sure that they don't affect things. In academic work, we're always striving for truth, that elusive thing that sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't. But good critical thinking is essential when it comes to making informed decisions about the data that you produce, about the notions from the books that you read and the other scholars that you look at. In practice, analysis and synthesis are those two kind of key components, I think. You're breaking down complex information, whether it's part of a literature review and you're synthesizing all of the information and claims that are being made by scholars in your field, or whether it's combining different ideas to form coherent wholes and to make your own claims and conclusions. You're doing both of those things at once. You can start to ask yourself certain questions when you do your reading or when you're looking at data. Why do I believe certain attitudes or certain conclusions that I've come to? What evidence supports this? Are there good reasons for me to accept certain statements? And how does it compare to the field of information that I've come across? Is it consistent with other explanations, things like that? A key component in good critical thinking is not only synthesizing ideas, analyzing others' ideas, it's evaluating those ideas as well and making judgment calls over something and providing arguments, at least to yourself, as to why you agree with certain things or disagree with others. So it's almost like keeping a logical record of your thinking about a topic and having good reasons why or why not you assent to certain views. Reading critically explores the process of analysis. You're analysing the individual decisions made by authors in the papers you come across. And this allows you to engage actively rather than passively in the ideas that are presented to you. So rather than just passively consuming these ideas, you're questioning them. You're asking, well, why do they say this? And what happens if we change certain parameters? Or how does it compare to other work out there? You can start by looking at a kind of framework if you need a guide to do this. I think understanding the readings that you have to do as part of your dissertation in terms of a descriptive level, so understanding them at that surface level. What are the readings about? Who wrote them? When did they write them? In what context were they written? Is a good place to start, and certainly start sifting through all the different papers. If you tend to whittle those down to a few key important documents that you want to analyse further, then your analysis can begin. This is where you're examining some of the main claims and the arguments and understanding the structure behind that. And then comes evaluation. It's a really important point of this, determining the strengths, the limitations, and the relevance of the information presented. You can ask a bunch of key questions about any paper that you're exposed to. I would definitely suggest thinking of some key questions. What's the author's main argument? How credible is the evidence that they're using to support their ideas? And how does it compare with other sources as a kind of starting point? You can find lots of resources on the Academic Skills Centre's website, and we've got kind of pre-made generic lists of critical questions you can apply there as well. When it comes to your output of ideas, you're also going to demonstrate criticality here. You're using the ideas and conclusions of others to synthesize and to infer conclusions of your own, especially, let's say, for example, during a literature review, where you're looking at lots of different ideas, you're identifying gaps in the literature, and you're coming to some kind of justification for a piece of research. This is a typical example of where you'd use this skill. But also it's for constructing arguments, making clear positions that are supported by evidence and logical reasoning. You must think that when your tutor reads through the arguments presented in your dissertation, they will be on the other side. You have presented these arguments, you've synthesized your arguments, now they're going to be analysing them, they're going to be breaking them apart to see how they all fit together. So the ability to look at it from both perspectives is really important. There's a few simple steps you can use almost as a checklist to make sure that your writing is being critical enough. When you do introduce points, make sure you state any claims as clearly and as unambiguously as possible so that there's no wiggle room or misunderstanding there. And if necessary, try to elaborate on some of the claims that you're making. Make sure that credible sources are used to support any claims you do make, because they will be picked apart, and you should be kind of performing this sense check on your own work as you go through. Remember to critique any evidence that you're putting forward for your arguments. Think from the other perspective. Imagine a kind of a position in opposition to the claims that you're putting forward. How would you best attack your own points of view if you were on the other side? Because that may well happen in a discussion with your tutor or in the final marking. And just make sure as you go through and you're making your points that contribute towards your final conclusions, that they are justified in some way. How are they working to answer my research questions? Are they relevant, or are they tangential to what I want to say? There's lots more available on the Academic Skills Centre's website about critical thinking, a lot more than we can go through today, obviously, but I hope this gives you a very brief overview, and I think I'll pass on now to Helen, who's going to be talking about beginning the writing process.
Right, hi everyone. So as Steve mentioned, my name's Helen. I'm the Writing Skills Advisor for the Academic Skills team. And I'm going to talk fairly quickly towards the tail end of our first half of the session, where obviously we're presenting these little segments to you. So I'm assuming that perhaps not all of you will be at the stage where you're thinking about writing. That might be something that's still ahead of you. So I'm going to go through my slides fairly rapidly, just because I appreciate many of you might not be at this stage, but obviously if you want to ask any questions, do use that Slido link that Graham shared at the beginning, so we can chat about writing if you want to, or I can signpost you to more support at the end of my set of slides. So I think if you are starting off, and if it is all very much ahead of you, this process of writing up your dissertation, don't worry if it feels very overwhelming. I think even if you presumably did an undergraduate dissertation, even if you're fairly comfortable with writing, it can still feel very overwhelming. It can feel like it's a lot of words to write, to generate. But what might be helpful is just kind of thinking first, which part of your dissertation makes the most sense to you to write first. So that might be a different chapter or a different section to other people on your course. It might even be a different section to what your supervisor advises you to write. So I think if there's a part of your dissertation that you are very interested in, or perhaps if you are, you've just finished gathering your results and that's kind of where your head's at, think about what makes the most sense for you to start writing. That will be the easiest way to get over any kind of writer's block. It's hopefully, gives you an idea of what you're most interested in to kind of gather that energy at the beginning of writing your dissertation. So if there's a particular chapter, if you're doing perhaps arts or humanities and there's a particular topic that you're really interested in, start with that chapter and just kind of get going. There's nothing worse than just sitting there and thinking, I don't know where to start. I really don't know how I feel about writing my method section, or I'm not comfortable with it. So go with whatever feels most intuitive or kind of clearest for you as a starting point. Another thing I think to be really mindful of, and perhaps a bit more practically, is the kind of timeline from here until submission. So how long do you actually have until you need to submit? Hopefully you know the actual date, that's kind of set in stone. So, be really kind of practical about breaking this down. So can you set yourself mini deadlines? Even if those are kind of a bit artificial, or perhaps if you're working quite closely with your supervisor and they're giving you, I don't know, deadlines to when perhaps they want to see bits of work, set yourself a deadline that's slightly ahead of that. Try and give yourself pockets of time, build in little kind of buffers, okay? Because sometimes things overrun, life gets in the way. So break down your time. If no one else is setting deadlines for you, set them for yourself. So when do you want to have your literature review written up by? When do you want your method section written by, for instance? And then try and break that down even further. So something that used to work for me was thinking, okay, if I need to get this chapter done by the end of the week, how many words is that? And how many words is that per day? And how many words is that this morning? Writing, quite often you require a good few hours, I think, really to get your head into it. So if you've got other commitments, you know, if you've kind of got work or you've got dependents, really try and ring fence some time, a solid chunk of time to sit down and try and write, because it really is a process that you need to kind of get your head into. It's not something that you can kind of dip in and out of for most people. So think about right, I've got a clear morning, what can I do this morning? How many words do I need to write this morning? How many words is that by 11 o'clock when I stop for a cup of tea? Okay, so try and break it down. It'll make it feel much more manageable as well. So sometimes students talk to us and they say, I've got a 10,000 word dissertation and that feels huge. If you break that down into, I need to write 250 words by 11 a.m., that might feel, you know, a bit more achievable. And think as well about what time of day do you work best. And it's okay to be really honest about this. If you're just not a morning person, don't force yourself to get up and try and work at, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning. If you're more of a night owl, just try and harness that and use that. So you're not kind of hopefully forcing yourself to write at times of day that don't feel very productive for you. Okay. A few kind of tips around planning. So I think for me, and I think for a lot of the students that we speak to, the more planning you can do and the more you plan in kind of as minute detail as possible, the easier it is then to write. Okay, so what you want to try and think about is, okay, what's that bigger picture? So like I was saying, how many words are you writing? What's your actual deadline for submission? Be aware of that bigger sense of all the different parts of your dissertation that you've got to write, but also think about the kind of the micro level. So you might be thinking about a chapter or a bigger section. How can you break that down into the subheadings that you might use? That will then help you again kind of plan your day. So rather than stressing about, I've got to write this chapter by the end of the week or the end of the month, break that down again. What are the different segments? If your subject doesn't encourage using subheadings, you can use them anyway and just delete them, okay? So just delete them from the final version that you submit. It's okay to use them as a kind of scaffold or a bit of a skeleton structure. But any way that you can kind of break that process down, plan each section, even plan it to the paragraph. So the little checklist that Stephen gave you at the very end of his last slide, that's a really good little checklist to almost think about, you know, is each paragraph being critical? Certainly for parts of your dissertation where you need to demonstrate critical thinking, that's a nice little way to even structure a paragraph. So thinking, as I've got here, what evidence are you going to use? What are you going to say about that? What are your references? So planning in that much detail. And that kind of hopefully gives you almost like a little checklist, a little kind of recipe to follow for your writing, and it should make it much easier to kind of know what you're going to say and what you want to include in each section, rather than, you know, sitting there with that blank page and the cursor's just kind of flashing away and you don't know what you're going to say or why you're going to say it. So plan and plan some more. And then finally, before we go into the Q&A segment, just a few tips, really. Throughout this whole process, do try and kind of look after yourselves as well. Step away from the screen. It can be very easy to just get very locked in this kind of end goal. I've got to submit by this date. I've got so much writing to do. Do try and build in breaks to your time. So when you're planning your time, plan in breaks as well. It will really help you out. If it would work for you as well, try and write with others. So as mentioned, there's the kind of shut up and work sessions that are meant to be a kind of communal thing, to sit and write with other people. Also use our support from the Academic Skills Centre. So you can book one-to-one appointments with us. I'll show you how you can do that in a second. We'll also be running the PGT Essentials Summer Dissertation Series. So that starts next week on the 26th of June. I think so, you know, if you work best by yourself, that's fine. But do, you know, use the people that are around you. Use us, you know, use your course mates, work with them, write with them, anything that kind of helps get you through. And I think a really important thing that I often say to students is, I think at this point of the year, the dissertation can start to feel really kind of all-consuming. It is only one part of your degree. It's only one part of your master's. It might feel like quite a big part, but you've already got lots of marks in the bag. You've already done lots and lots of other modules. It's the last bit, but it's not the only bit. So it might feel like that right now, but do try and put it into perspective, okay? So just to finish, if you want to follow up with any of the support that we've mentioned, these are some QR codes that will take you there. So the first one will take you to our webpage. The second one is if you wanted to book a one-to-one appointment at any point. And then lastly, Stephen mentioned lots of resources. Spig mentioned some Canvas courses and LibGuides. All of that you can find through the Academic Skills Gateway. So that's the last QR code there. Okay. So I think I'm handing back to Graham for some Q&A. And thank you very much.